What up, folks? It's your boy Chicago again. As you can see, Tim in the work van. I'm a working man. I'm on the road, so I got to work for a living. But anyway, we're going to talk about today voter ID laws. Are they necessary? But before we get into that, as usual, I'm going to go ahead and ask that you go ahead and continue to smash that subscribe button. But we're going to be taking this in a few places. I know a lot of my audience leans right, so you may or may not like what I got to say. But regardless, give me a like if you do, which I'd greatly appreciate. But if you don't, I want to know that too. So go ahead and hit the like or the dislike button, depending on how you feel about this shit that I'm about to drop. Are voter ID laws necessary? I'm going to start out by saying right off the bat, you absolutely should have to prove who the hell you are when you're casting a ballot. It's just like anything else. You go up and do something, you need to be able to, they need to know that you are who you say you are. So when it comes to voter ID, I have no problem with that. The recent passing of voter ID laws in Georgia was very controversial. I mean, it was controversial to the point it created enough controversy that the Major League Baseball franchise removed their All-Star game from Atlanta to Colorado. So you're talking millions of dollars. I think they said about $100 million that Atlanta will lose, the state of Georgia will lose, and it will end up going to Colorado simply because they moved that game from one town to the next. And obviously, we're talking about right at the end of a pandemic. Lots of people are going to be shopping, flying to the particular city, touring the area. So there's a lot of money lost, a lot of revenue lost for local shops and things like that. That was Georgia's ID law. Now, I'm going to start out by immediately saying I totally disagree that it's voter suppression to require somebody to show their driver's license or their ID when they vote. I think that's ridiculous. It's not racist. Even the poorest of the poor should be able to afford a state ID or a driver's license sometime in their adult lifetime. I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy at all, and I had a state ID before I could drive, and I had a driver's license, from, 18 or whatever, up until the age I am now. I have always had ID. I always leave the house with ID. And I just don't buy into the excuse that an adult cannot get their hands on an ID. I just don't buy into that. So is voter ID law is necessary? In my opinion, absolutely, when it comes to the ID. Now, the problem with some of this stuff is that it's the additional things they add into there beyond just simply saying you have to have an ID. For instance, with Georgia, they have a provision in there that says if we have long lines in our state for people in line, waiting to vote, you can't come and hand that person a bottle of water. It's a crime. So I think that in that situation, now we've taken the voter ID law and added pork in there that is outright bullshit. You can't give somebody a bottle of water that's waiting to vote in 90-degree weather for a couple hours. I think that's insane, and it's unnecessary if the only goal is to for somebody to prove who they say they are. Now, Texas just tried to pass a voter ID law last week. Today is Memorial Day, by the way, and Texas has tried to pass a voter ID law. And in theirs, they have some real controversial shit that is in addition to requiring a driver's license or state ID that I personally have no problem with. One of the things is they said they eliminated drive-through voting, which basically means that if you set up a polling place or somewhere here or there, you can't vote out of your car. They want you to get out of the car and go into a building. And when I say a building, they also banned or outlawed tents. So they basically are saying you need to have an actual physical structure. So they're making it very difficult for any pop-up voting sites. This has to be a building that's established, and you have to get out of your car and go inside of it. You can show your ID to a poster through your driver's window, or you can walk into a tent and hand a poster your ID. Why they require you to have it to be a physical structure? Now it seems like there's something else a little bit more going on. In addition to that, they've also tried to get they tried to get basically signature match. So now not only do they want you to hand them your ID, they also want the signature to match. So You know, say you got your driver's license 2-3 years ago. My driver's license I received about 5 years ago. Now, when I fill out my ballot, the signature on my ballot has to match the signature on my driver's license. Why? You got a picture of me right in your face. I mean, do you really need to look at this? You think not only am I able to steal this guy's driver's license and look like him, you think I wouldn't get the signature right? If I could do all of that, you think I'd miss the signature? I mean, so it starts to get a little bit heavy. Now, they got the signature match, so I guess I would ask you, if you had to sign something really quick, would it match the signature on your driver's license? I think in some cases, yeah, for some people. Some cases, no. It depends on what's going on. Like, I have carpal tunnel right now. And when I signed my driver's license 5 years ago, I did not have carpal tunnel. So it does affect the way I use my, it affects my dexterity. When I'm on a keyboard, I have to take breaks, let my hands hang down so the nerves reconnect, things like that. I didn't have to do that when I signed my last updated driver's license. And like I said, it's been about 5 years since I received the driver's license. Also, when I received my driver's license, because it was a license and they do like raised etching, I took time and really did the letters. I didn't scratch my license, which normally if I sign a check or a money order, I just scratch some shit out of it on there. I don't go through all of the intricate details of trying to make sure you can determine every single letter. It's just a signature. I'm standing there with an ID. If I'm cashing a money order at Walmart or you go into your bank, they don't do signature matches when they're handing you cash money if you got an ID. So why would they do this for voting? Like I said, unless there's something potentially sinister going on. The reason I don't like signature matches is for two reasons. First of all, if I'm standing right in front of you, since you done made me walk in the building and present you an ID, if I get the signature wrong, that means that you're going to determine that my vote is fraud and invalid. You're supposed to arrest me. If you're saying that there is widespread voter fraud, and here's a person in front of you that is casting a ballot, and you're going to disqualify it because you think it isn't the right person, the signature don't match, so it must not be the right person, I'm going to throw the ballot out. Okay, then what are you going to do to the person who's giving you the wrong signature? You should arrest them. And what I mean by that is, do not just say there is widespread voter fraud. Show some proof. Show some people that you caught committing fraud. So now you got to start, you're supposed to do something with these people. If you think his signature is fraudulent and you're going to disqualify his ballot, but you're just going to let him walk out, then it looks like your concern is really not stopping fraudulent voting, but just stopping the vote. So that's one of the issues I have with that. The second issue, to me, is certainly sinister. What I mean by that is, by requiring a signature match, you now basically take out the potential fraud that you thought voters were going to have, and you put the power to do that in the hands of posters. What I mean by that is, like, okay, let's say, for instance, I'm running a polling office in an all-black area, and all of a sudden I receive a ballot from, Jennifer Kaminsky. I know that chances are that it's probably not a black person. The signature don't match. I'm gonna throw this one out. She's not around anymore, and they don't have to notify Miss Kaminsky that her ballot was disqualified. I'm a pollster. I see that name. I really want the African American candidate to win. Now, Miss Kaminsky may be voting for the same person I want, but if I'm trying to target a certain demographic or a certain group of people, chances are the people with names like Miss Kaminsky probably are not going to be, my odds of getting my candidate in there are better when I start targeting certain names, and that gives me the power to do that. So I don't like the signature match thing from that standpoint. If you got the person standing in front of you, presenting you with an ID, the idea that you can still disqualify that based on their signature not matching, it just seems to me to be more sinister. I would love to hear your comments or what your thoughts are on this in the comments, rather, because I know a lot of you watching definitely agree with the voter ID laws. Some of you agree with it wholeheartedly because there's a lot of people watching who do believe that Trump won the election in a landslide, as he's claiming, and that Biden is illegitimate. So If you believe that, chances are you support every single thing about these voter ID laws, because in my opinion, they're tailored to your favor. I mean, because if you notice, the states that are passing these voter ID laws are, for the most part, you know, they're pro-Trump states. I mean, let's just be real. You're not hearing about these new laws being passed in Massachusetts or, you know, or Maine. They're being passed in all of these southern, heavily pro-Trump states, because they do believe, like many of you, that the election was stolen in a landslide. Here's my problem. In a country with 330 million people, I don't know what percentage of us voted, but it's going to be well over 100 million, because you got to think, Joe Biden, they're claiming that Joe Biden received over 80 million votes and Trump received over 70 million votes. That's 150 million right there. If there truly was, I'm sorry about that, but if there truly was widespread voter fraud, not just a few things here or there, but according to the Republican Party, if there was widespread voter fraud, in a country with that many millions of people, 150 million of them actually voting, you should be able to produce tens of thousands of fraudulent ballots. There should be a lot of arrests. I'm not saying you're going to catch everybody, because there may be, let's say, liberals that don't want you to catch people and protect certain people. But when you're doing investigations in Arizona, which is has been a red state for a long period of time, Georgia, red state for a long period of time, you should be able to present thousands of people being caught, because the state of Georgia and the state of Arizona was not going to help the Democrats commit widespread fraud when their governors and their leadership are Republicans. And they have not been able to do that. In fact, the governor of Georgia is on the record as saying this election was ran rather well. So I'm not necessarily buying that Trump won in a landslide. I would also say it's very suspect that you only are claiming that there's fraud in the states you lost. That doesn't look right. I mean, you're going to tell me that there's widespread fraud in Arizona, but a huge state like Texas ran it perfectly. There was no issues. State like Florida ran it perfectly. There's no reason to investigate them at all. Everybody in Florida was fine, but Arizona was cheating. That if there's widespread fraud, it's going to be in all 50 states. It's not going to just be in a few states that you lost. He's investigating, like, I think it was Michigan, Pennsylvania. I don't know. He didn't investigate Ohio because he won Ohio. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona. Maybe it was a couple more of them in there, but it was mainly those red states, those close states that flipped in the direction that he didn't, or the Trump campaign did not expect it to go. That, to me, is Wisconsin was another one. That, to me, is very suspect, because if you want to show fraud, do all 50 states. You find a lot more issues, even if it's only a few issues in every state. If you do all 50, you're gonna have a bigger group of screw-ups. Then you can take that to the courts and say, listen, we did an investigation of all 50 states, and here's what we found. We think this should be redone or retallied or recounted. But when you only do a few states, it looks suspect. It really does. And then also claiming that you won, not claiming that there was fraud, is another issue. I mean, if there's fraud, there's fraud. But when you say you won, you're saying that Joe Biden's 80 million votes is somewhere down here and your 70 million votes is somewhere up here. I mean, that's literally millions of votes you're actually offsetting. You got to be able to show some of that. At least several 100,000, you know. I mean, come up with 500,000 or 600,000 votes you can show that were fraudulent or should be disqualified. Even though you need more than that to upset an 80 million versus 70 million offset. But if you can come up with 500, 600,000-700,000 votes that should, then people are starting to listen. I don't even know if he presented 100,000. That's just not a lot to demand that the entire United States. Well, he wasn't even really demanding we redo it. He was demanding that he be put in office. He was saying that he won. Based on what? I mean, it just wasn't there. So I don't want to, but like I said, the original question of this video was, do I believe voter IDs laws are necessary? Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I think I just don't see any reason to be against that. think that even the poorest of Americans can get access to an ID. Now, here's something I think we should have, and I think there would be one party that would probably be really against this, is that we should make voting day a holiday. You want everybody to vote on the day. You don't want mail-in votes. You don't want drive-in votes. You don't want people early voting. Make that day in November a freaking holiday. Make it like jury duty, where the employer has to give that individual a certain amount of time to go in and cast their ballot. And that would stop that. That would literally stop that. That would remove the excuse, all of the other excuses, because people don't vote sometimes because of work. I mean, if you're going to lose a day's pay to go vote, a lot of people would opt not to go vote. I mean, that's hundreds of dollars you're going to lose. Even if you're working in, a low-wage job, it could be at least $100 you're losing if you have to go and vote. And if you go with the laws that they're passing now in the urban areas, it's going to equate to lines. I mean, there's no way around it. That's why people are saying that it's voter suppression. I'm not necessarily saying it's voter suppression, but I do believe that the goal is to make it take longer to vote. I mean, make no mistake about it, whether it's an ID, which I think we absolutely should have, or you're stopping people from getting water, or you're removing mailboxes, or you're limiting time. Whether you agree with this or disagree with it, the end result is there are additional hurdles to voting. I mean, that's just it. You want to make sure there's no fraud, so you're going to put up different hurdles. But they are hurdles, no matter what you want to, no matter what you want to label them. At the end of the day, those are additional hurdles to voting. And the more hurdles you add to something, the fewer people that are going to be successful at negotiating those hurdles. Now, it's not that you can't negotiate those. Anybody can go out and get an ID, but you are making it so they got to do something. It's got to be in a building. They got to get out of the car and go inside. Okay, anybody who's too damn lazy to get out of the car, they're just not going to do it. Now, we can argue and say, well, they shouldn't be voting anyway if they're that lazy to get out and do their civic duty. But at the same time, I'm just simply saying the more hurdles you add to a task, the fewer people that are going to complete that task. Even if the hurdles are very easy, like pulling out and showing an ID. Some people have IDs and they've lost them, or there's a heap of reasons. But I think that you should have to present an ID. I am absolutely against demanding it be a physical structure as opposed to being able to set up a tent in a neighborhood or something like that. If it passes certification and it passes state law, why the hell does it have to be a building? I don't care if it's a guy I don't care if it's a certified poster on the street that's letting people walk up to him. If he's certified, or if the machines are there, or whatever the case may be, why does it have to be in a physical building? That's a hurdle that is unnecessary. Why can't it be in a tent? Why can't it be in a trailer, a mobile trailer, or a van? They've banned all of that. It has to be a building. Explain that. I mean, really explain that. So, voter ID laws, I say the voter ID is an absolute necessity, but all of the pork, all of the other shit they're adding to it, then yeah, it does become problematic, particularly saying you can't give somebody water in a line and things like that. So, I'm just going to simply say what I said earlier in the video. If there is fraud, widespread fraud, make some arrests. I mean, you're comparing signatures, which I think is absolutely fucking unnecessary. Everything about requiring a signature match to me sounds suspect. In 2021, the best way you can identify somebody is to look at their damn signature. That's insane. So outside of that, I'm okay with the ID, but I absolutely think that there are some things in the background that are going on that does have sinister motives. And I mean, let's just be real. The liberal party, even in liberal states where all of the candidates are liberal, like Illinois, for instance, the governor, the mayor in places like Chicago, none of them are doing this. And they don't even and they're not even worried about a Republican winning office. And just among the liberals, they don't think that these type of laws are that necessary. Why is that? They don't seem to think there's a lot of fraud in their area. I mean, if you're a liberal candidate and you're running against another liberal candidate, you still want the election to be legitimate, yet they're not setting up these huge voting fortress type laws. Just let the person come and show their ID, and that should do it. But yeah, I think they should have election day should be a holiday for the presidential election, rather. Maybe even the day of the midterms. Make those, those two elections are pretty big, and those are national elections. I'm not talking about gubernatorial and other elections, but I'm just simply saying for the midterms and for the actual presidential election, that's basically every 2 years. And it doesn't have to be a full holiday. Just give that person 4 or 5 hours that they get to go vote, where the employer cannot take disciplinary action against them, to let them go vote. I think that, that would help a lot of this, but you're only going to be for that if the goal is to get more people to vote. If you're for reducing the amount of people that vote, you're not going to be for that. And I think that if we tried to pass a law to make voting day a holiday, I think the people that would be against it would be a clear example of those who want to reduce the number of people voting. But anyway, I'm going to end this video here by asking that you go ahead and post in the comments, what do you think? Are you a fan of voter ID laws? And when I say voter ID laws, I'm not just talking about requiring that you have an ID, which also, too, to be honest, I mean, how much does it cost to get a state ID? $5-10 maybe at the most in most states. Give it to them. Give it to them. It would not cost the state, any state, just about every state, I would say every state in the union could afford to give its citizens some type of government ID for free. I mean, we just gave out trillions of fucking dollars during the pandemic. You can give out a free ID. It is not that hard to do that. And it would not break anybody to give out a free ID. I mean, you're talking about printing something off in bulk. When they charge you $5 or $10 for your driver's license at the DMV, they're making a fucking profit off of that. A lot of profit off of that. It's plastic. So they could give you that just to be able to vote. I mean, to take a digital picture of you or a fingerprint or something like that, I mean, it would be real cheap for the government to give out free IDs to the people. Now, obviously, if you go to the far left, they're going to still come up with bullshit like, well, he's so poor, he can't even drive down and pick up the damn ID. Like I said, I'm not going to argue with anybody claiming that an adult can't come up with $5 to get an ID. Certainly not, you're so damn poor you can't get to the state office or the DMV to pick up something they're giving you for free. I'm not going to buy that, because chances are if you're that poor, you're receiving welfare or food stamps or something, and you found a way to get down there and get that shit signed to get. So I'm not going to buy into the fact that you would be that poor you can't pick up an ID. And there would be people saying that. But yeah, give them a damn free ID. Make voting day a holiday, and that would eliminate all of this. But I do believe one party would be very much against that. See you in the comments. Chicago out.